If you're a reader who loves books about characters and life situations that stay in your mind rent free after that last page, this episode is for you. I'm so excited to welcome you to an author chat with Nikki Erlick, whose stories invite us to sit with life's biggest, hardest, I would say most human questions. She is the New York Times bestselling author of The Measure and The Poppy Fields. And among many of the recognitions that the book received, The Measure was a Read with Jenna book club pick and has been translated into 24 languages worldwide. And her second novel, The Poppy Fields, became an instant USA Today bestseller and a Goodreads Choice Awards finalist. Nikki graduated from Harvard and Columbia and previously worked as a travel writer and ghostwriter. So I'm excited to talk about some of those things as well. Welcome, Nikki.
Thank you so much for having me. Super happy to be here.
It's so great to talk to you. I know I reached out to you and, oh my gosh, I loved your book. Can we chat? And I'm so glad you said yes. And I already shared a bit about you, but for those that are meeting you for the first time, can you share about your journey to where you are now?
Sure. So I'm super lucky that I'm living my dream job right now. And I've always wanted to be a writer. I just always was obsessed with books from a super young age and very lucky to have a family and many, many teachers who all really nurtured a love of reading for me and gave me lots of books to read. And I knew that I loved writing. And so started pursuing more of a traditional professional journey in terms of, working in journalism and ended up in travel writing and ghostwriting, as you mentioned, and novel writing, sort of fiction was always just a thing I was doing on the side because I had a day job. And I started writing my first book, The Measure, the manuscript for that book back in like late 2018 while I was working as a travel writer and just kind of doing it on weekends and evenings. And never really imagined that, a few years later, I would be, talking about both of these books now and being a full-time novelist. It's really a dream come true.
I love hearing people's stories because a lot of the conversations I have were people just doing this on the side. It was a passion and then they pursued it and it became this thing that they could do. And I love hearing those stories. And I think it's really encouraging for people like me that also have a day job and have these passions that they do on the side, or
Yes.
people that have always thought about writing and they're like, yeah, I can do it too. So I love that.
Writing is the type of career that having other careers and hobbies only really helps because then it gives you, if you're a doctor, you can then write medical dramas. It's always helpful to kind of have other things going on too.
I love that. Well, let's start with The Measure because it was your debut book, and that is what started me on this journey with you. Can you give a quick premise for those that are not familiar with it yet?
Yes. So The Measure opens on what seems like it's just an ordinary morning, but overnight something quite extraordinary has happened, which is that everywhere, all around the world, on the doorstep of every adult, has appeared a box. And they're all identical boxes, small, kind of wooden looking boxes. And each box says on it, the measure of your life lies within. And not everybody opens the box right away, but the people who do find that within each box is a piece of string. And soon the whole world realizes that the length of that piece of string corresponds with the length of your life. And so all of a sudden, everyone is faced with this choice of whether or not they want to open their box and measure their string and find out how long they're going to live. And if you do that, what do you do with that knowledge? And so it follows, a cast of many different characters who are all kind of navigating this new world and this, personal decision.
I love thought-provoking books like this and infused with magic. And I immediately thought of some of the books I love, like Expiration Dates, or, I recently read One and Only, and even Midnight Library. And I feel like this book was not a super hard read in the sense of there's small chapters, digestible, but there is so much to unpack in each of the different stories of people. So, what was how did this come about? What was your writing process for this?
It's funny you mentioned the short chapters. I love short chapters as a reader, and so that's always going to be a feature of books that I write short chapters for people, because as you said, especially when it's like heavier stuff, it's nice to have a slightly smoother reading experience, perhaps. And the process was that I had the inspiration, this idea of these, strings, these strings of life, based on ancient Greek mythology and their kind of vision of fate, that the three fates would weave these threads for every kind of human being, and snip the thread at the end of a person's life. And I think we're first kind of introduced to them in the Odyssey, sort of Homer writing. And so my thought was just, what if these strings are real? What if we could see them? And I put them in a box for every human being because of another Greek myth, Pandora's box. And so wanted it to be that same kind of test of people's curiosity and temptation. And so it started just with that idea. And then I just kept thinking of more and more characters who I wanted to explore in that world. My first thought was, a couple, two people, they're in love, and they get strings of different lengths. What do they do now? But very quickly I was like, well, what about a doctor? Because what's going on in the healthcare world with these strings? And what about a soldier, someone who's in, a potentially life-threatening profession? What about a politician? What's happening? What are the political ramifications of this? And so just more and more characters kept kind of like knocking on the door to my brain. And I had to keep adding them in until I hit a number that felt like I couldn't go anymore or I was going to lose readers.
So I know there are a lot of different ways that people write. Some people are big plotters, some people are the characters just speak to me. What is your method? Maybe it's a combination of things or something completely different.
With this book, and I guess with both books, I knew the ending of the book, in the sense that I knew where I wanted each character to end up, whether that was like what their emotional journey and where they go, or like literally how I want their story to end. And so I knew what I was writing towards, but I didn't really have an outline of what the book was going to look like or how I was going to get there. And so I just kind of wrote towards this destination. And one, especially with a book with so many characters, wanted them all to kind of interconnect throughout the story and have their stories overlap. And so that was kind of a process of discovery throughout, of figuring out where I can have them, intertwine. But it's helpful to have a place where I'm going, but a more detailed outline wouldn't have hurt either.
No, I was going through and I loved the fact that you do touch on all these different categories of love and relationships. It's not just romance, it's friendship, it's siblings, it's, all these different characters. Now, I will say this was a book club pick, and people were all over the spectrum on the number of characters, or, I think some people were listening in audio and they went, oh, it was hard to like jump from
Yeah.
story. I was going, no, I loved it. I devoured it.
I felt like I couldn't have if I just told one character's story, people would have been like, but what about everybody else?
Yes, yes. And when some of them intertwined, I went, I was expecting them to cross,
Sure. Yeah.
but yeah.
Yeah.
So you
I love reading those moments, or like watching in a movie or a TV show when you get that kind of unexpected character connection. I love that.
yes. Is there any particular hope you had for your readers? Like they would take away a certain thing? I mean, there's a lot to take away, or it can go in a lot of different ways, but
It's funny because when I was writing the book, a lot of it was written during the pandemic, actually. Because I had been a travel writer, as I mentioned. I lost that job during the pandemic because, there was no need to be a travel writer. And so I wrote a lot of the book kind of in unemployment, in isolation, and only like my mom and sister reading snippets of it, and just like never, not even thinking, 2 years from now, people are going to discuss this in a book club. What do I want them to discuss? It just felt so far off and so unlikely, that I was really just writing a story that kind of interested me and that I was fascinated by. But I do feel like looking back on it, I want it to be a story that makes people think about just the way that they live their life and the way that they interact with other people, and especially people who are different from them. In this book, obviously, the main difference is the length of people's lives, because it's a world in which people know how long the people around them are going to live. But it could be a stand-in for any kind of superficial difference between people. And I think it's a book about empathy and compassion, and I do feel like so many books are about that too, because just the inherent act of reading is an act of empathy, an act of stepping into the mind of a character and trying to sort of see someone else's perspective. But this book kind of definitely hits it hard, we'll say.
Yeah. Oh no, I've already had several friends that I went, you guys, have you read this book? Because I want to talk to people about it. And then they read it and we're texting back and forth about different parts. It's been great. It's been great.
I'm glad, because writing is so solitary, right? It's and especially with this book, writing in literal isolation, it's such a solitary act. And so the fun part then comes when it is about, oh my gosh, people aren't reading it in isolation. They're reading it together. They're reading it as buddy reads. They're reading it as book clubs, and that is very gratifying.
And parts of it, I went, oh my gosh, this is very triggering because of things that have happened in society and in the world. And I think in book club, even, they had to do a little caveat of, okay, we're not going to get into all the political stuff that's happening.
Sure.
Let's keep it, but it was a great conversation, and it was fascinating to see different things that different people took away from it. But I do have to ask, so if this happened to you, would you open your book?
I would try really hard not to, but I feel like I can't definitively say no, because I just don't know that I would actually have that willpower. And I would be very tempted to want to open the boxes of the people around me, my loved ones, which becomes a point of sort of drama in the book of whether or not you have a right to open someone else's box. And I would not without their permission, but I would be more tempted almost to look at theirs than to look at mine.
And I think that was a huge thing. I don't think this is a spoiler, but I think that is a huge thing of just in life when the control is taken away from you to make the decisions, but other people make that decision for you. And I don't think that's a spoiler, right? That's just a statement about life.
Yeah, I've heard a decent amount of people who are like, this book inspired a whole couples therapy session for me and my spouse, because it was we have to make a plan. If these boxes arrive, what are we doing? Are we making the same decision? Are we
Yes. So
it's so funny.
I think even in our conversations, people said they would want to open it so that they make decisions of whether they have kids or not, or how they prepare for things. And I'm kind of I think I'm in a very similar, I don't want to open it, but I don't know if I can last forever space, because I don't want to live in fear of, I don't want to do these things because I'm not going to live until a certain point of time, and there are things like the 23andMe genetics testing. I don't do it because I don't want to know and live in fear.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this book is, people are it's magical, it's fiction and stuff, but not really. I mean, there, as you said, there are a lot of tests you can take, things you can do. I'm sure probably 20 years from now, science will create something where they can try to predict how long you're going to live. And these are going to be real conversations that people are going to be having.
Yeah. And these are all things, there's no right answer, right? Everybody has something for themselves. And again, we go back to you make your own decision. You don't want someone else making it for you. And I heard you already talk about some of the fun comments that you've gotten, or messages. Are there any other ones that you would want to share with us on memorable comments?
I see a lot of photos of people with their book clubs, and they make boxes for everybody who attends, which is very sweet. And then I'm like, but what do you put inside them? And they're like, oh, we put candy strings or things that are fun inside them, but that sometimes people will get to the book club and they won't open the box, and they won't know that there's something inside, which is I love an interactive themed book club, the super engaged book clubs. That's so much fun to see. And I've definitely, on a more serious note, I've definitely heard people have reached out to me with very personal stories about why this book resonated with them, reading it during a time in their life when someone in their family has received, a difficult diagnosis, the sort of like the equivalent of getting their shorter string, and how the book has, helped them navigate such a difficult time. And that I never could have anticipated when I was writing this book. Like books bring me a lot of comfort and solace during difficult times, but to think that people are reading this book during such a difficult moment and finding even the tiniest little bit of comfort in it is just remarkable.
I don't have the specific. I listened to it in audio, and I don't have the specific quote with me. But there was one, and this might be a spoiler. So for people listening, where there was one point where a character is saying she's a certain race, she's a woman, and now she has to deal with this. Like, why does it have to be her? Or why does it have to be them? And I was just like, oh, I know, all these things. It's not just that, but there were so many characters and so many things that I could resonate with or see friends or family or whomever, and what a opening of conversations. And this is what I love about books too. You mentioned it too, but this is what I love about books.
Yes. And we need them, we need them now more than ever. So everybody keep reading.
I want to talk about audiobooks too, because I'm always curious about the picking process. I love Julia Whalen. So when she was narrating The Measure, I went, oh, okay, done and done. And for my listeners or readers, I do get to talk to Julia Whalen in the near future. So I'm very excited about that. So pay
Oh,
attention to that episode
amazing.
as well. Yeah, I'm very, very excited. Um, but what is that process like for you on the author end of, do you make a request of these are the people that I would love to have? What does that look
I remember with The Measure, I think that they sent sort of the publisher sent me a handful of people's like audio clips of sample narrators, because I actually don't listen to a ton of audiobooks. I read a lot more hardcover, or paperback, and so I wasn't as knowledgeable. But when Julie Whalen was on that list, and I was like, well, I know Julie Whalen because she narrates huge authors, and I'm like, but I'm like a first time author, like I'm a nobody, like she wouldn't do that. And they were like, oh, we'll give it a shot. Like, let's give it a shot. Maybe she's free, And then when she said yes, that was just incredible because, she's so good. And I knew I wanted somebody who had kind of a theatrical background, and she does. And I feel like that is, like that to me is why we can't replace audiobook narrators with like AI or something, because they're coming with this, they're coming with their humanity, they're coming with their theater skills, they're coming with all of these things that bring it to life. And so that was just incredible. And then with my second book, The Poppy Fields, because it has, it's a little like different sort of format wise in that I have newspaper articles and interview transcripts and these other kind of pieces of media. And so the audio director at HarperCollins said, what if we get, a sort of multi-cast, like a large cast ensemble to narrate it? And that sounded super cool because like a full play in your head. And so we listened to a bunch of people, and we're casting what I thought sounded like, oh, like this is a younger female voice for the social media, and like, like that kind of thing. And then we were super lucky and got Marin Ireland as like the main narrator for the bulk of the text. And she is, up there with Julia just as like an incredible rock star narrator. And so I just lucked out both times. Like I really lucked out with all of my audiobooks.
I am a huge audiobook user, I don't know, listener. So I loved both of them. Both of them were in audio and loved it. So I'm glad. I'm glad.
Yes, I'm always glad to hear that they're good because I've only really ever listened to snippets of them because I find it just kind of like cringy to listen to my own words like read back to me. It's like I don't reread the book. Like I can't reread these books after they're published. And like I just like once my editor was like, pencils down, like they're going to the printer, you can't touch it anymore, which is like at least 6 months before the book comes out. I was just like, I'm never going to read it again because I'm going to be up at night rethinking that sentence and wishing I could have changed that one word,
Yeah.
it'll keep me up. And so I stopped reading them. So I haven't read The Measure since like some point in 2021.
Yeah.
And sometimes people will tag me in a photo of like a quote from the book that they really like. And I don't even recognize the quote. I'm like, did I write that? I don't know.
Like, that is good.
Right? Normally I'm just like, oh, I don't remember that, but I guess I wrote that.
So in the process, because these are very hefty, and especially as we go into poppy fields, that is a very grief is a heavy topic, right?
Yeah.
Do you, I guess, during your writing process, is it just a heavy thing that you kind of sit with and a healing journey for you, or is it kind of like a, okay, I need to set it down for a bit and then do something else? What?
Yeah, it's interesting because I've had some people with The Measure be like, I can't read that book because I think it'll give me too much anxiety. Like I don't want to think about my own mortality, which is fair. But I'm someone like I've struggled with anxiety for years and like, been on a therapy journey and all this. Like, so anxiety is like a big part of my life, dealing with uncertainty, with lack of control. And so it's kind of wild that I would write this book that is so like tackling these things head on. And I think was a way for me to be like, well, writing is as you said, sort of it's healing. It's a way to confront things that we can't always confront in our daily life. And so I was like, I'm going to take on the big things, like the things that bother me and the things that, the questions that don't have answers and the things that I wish I had answers to. And so I do feel like it's part of why I choose to tackle things, because they bother me too. And with the Poppy Fields, I had a book about, a scientist who invents a cure for grief. It was born from a time of grief in my own life, loss in my family. And so it was very, very personal, very healing in the sense that I think writing it was not quite as healing. It was very hard to write like what I was going through emotionally, but I felt like at least I could draw on my experiences and make it feel more authentic. And I think what has been healing is like seeing the book out in the world and talking with other people about it and having readers be like, this book felt like exactly what I was feeling when I was going through this. And like that, that feeling of connection and of like, oh, we're not alone in what we go through in life. That's been healing.
And in the poppy fields, we'll kind of transition there. Um, you kind of talked about what it is about already, but my friends, I don't know if I'm just getting to the age where we're going through a lot of hard things, but I've heard multiple times where people have said, it feels like the world is going on around me and I just can't, you know? And there's a specific section, again, I don't have the exact quote, but someone's wrestling with this and saying, well, why not sleep? It already feels like I am when everybody else is living, you know?
Totally. Yeah. Yes, and for people who haven't read it, in the poppy fields, you go to sleep. That's the cure for grief here, is that you go to sleep for a month or 2 months at a time, to be healed. And so, yeah, it's like some people are thinking that's crazy. How could you leave your life for 2 months? But as you said, people who are going through an extremely difficult time, already feel like their life is on pause and they've sort of lost forward momentum. And so, what's 2 months asleep? Like sleep is an escape, and so it's very appealing, to people. And I thought it would be, it certainly was appealing to me at the time, and yeah, so it was very, uh, it was heavy to write, and as you said, I did have to then like sort of go take a walk, go feel the sunshine, go listen to music, go do other things. But both of the books were very rewarding to write as well.
And we have to talk about the possibility of the side effect because it's not just that people go to sleep and you wake up less
Right.
in grief, right? But there is the possibility of you waking up with this potentially to feel less of that intense love towards the person or the event or whatever it was that was causing the grief. How did you arrive at that being the cost of
Mm-hmm.
going through this?
Yeah. Initially, I didn't have a side effect to the sleep treatment. It was just I felt like it was a big enough sacrifice that you have to go to sleep for 2 months, and that's the trade off to be healed. But the more that I thought about it, the more like that's it's too easy. It's too good to be true. And if this treatment is trying to erase grief, erase loss, then my thought was, well, grief only exists where love has been and still is. Grief and loss and love are sort of two sides of the same coin here. And so if you're trying to erase one, do you risk erasing the other? And so for some people, a small portion of people who do wake up no longer feeling that grief, they also no longer sort of remember the love that they felt for that person. And so then it becomes a much more difficult choice, I feel, and sort of a gamble because it's not a guarantee that you're going to get the side effect. Most likely you won't, but how do you make that choice? And a lot like the measure, I wanted it to feel like it's not a right or wrong, it's not a moral immoral. It's deeply individual, and I was trying to be very kind of judgment free as I was writing the story.
And there's so many different characters in this as well, in a similar way to the measure, and different reactions to the decisions that the characters make, and all again very, very relatable. I think that's why I love these stories that you write. Of it is very real, and you can either put yourself or people that you know in those situations, and again covering the whole lot of, is it a spouse? Is it a sibling? Is it a friend? Is it a, whomever?
Yes. Yeah. The reality of the characters is very important to me because with both books, there is a level of kind of suspending disbelief, more so with the measure, where like on page one, you have to buy into the fact that these magical boxes have like appeared overnight. And so I wanted everything else surrounding the boxes, surrounding that kind of mystery and magic to feel super grounded in reality and super reflective of our current world. It's not set in a future world, it's set in our modern day. And with the poppy field as well, like this treatment is sort of sci-fi. It doesn't exist right now. It possibly will 30 years from now, I don't know. But so I wanted everything again around surrounding it to feel like it's your current reality and you can recognize it, hopefully to make it easier to buy into what I'm asking readers to buy into.
Also, okay, you bring up a good point when you said sci-fi, because that was another thing that came up during our book club discussion of people thought it was going to be more sci-fi and their normal sci-fi readers. And so I know you made a conscious decision. There was not going to be a revealing of where the boxes came from and that kind of thing, but people were expecting that. And so I was not, and that was not where I was going with it. But now I can see, and I don't know if that is a feedback point that you've gotten a lot of, where did the boxes come from?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. I think I think both books were really tough for like my publisher, like marketing team. I gave them a real challenge there because we didn't really know like what genre to call them, because they are they're not like the measure. It's not full dystopian. It's not Handmaid's Tale, Hunger Games, but it is not our reality. And and yeah, and it's like, is it magical realism? Is it super light sci-fi? Is it fantasy? It borrows elements from those things, but it is not fully. And so I feel like that was just a challenge. And I recognize definitely some readers were going to come into it thinking it's maybe more genre than another. But I've certainly had people be like, I really wanted to know where the boxes came from. Um,
Like, it
and they'll
doesn't
like
matter. It's just,
they'll like ask me, like they'll like come up to me in like a signing line or something and be like, I know that you don't reveal it in the book, but could you just like secretly whisper to me like where the boxes came from? And I won't tell anyone. But yeah, to me it's like, yeah, that was the point of the book is less where the boxes came from and more what we do with them and that reveals about what it means to be human. And yeah, but I've also had some, as I mentioned, the book clubs that want to like create boxes for everybody. I've had people message me and be like, can you give me the exact dimensions of the box so I can like recreate it perfectly and like all And a true sci-fi writer like would have all this knowledge, but I don't.
It doesn't matter. It's the concept.
The concept, and I think a lot of people read the book like entirely as an allegory. You know that the boxes are just a metaphor, and like they're not meant to be taken literally at all. Which I think is also a very a valid interpretation of the book.
So there is so much that goes into both of these books, so many different ways that it has gone and could go, and I can imagine you probably had more scenarios, and you mentioned that you could only go to a certain number, right, before you got overwhelmed or go too. Was that a huge editing process, going back and forth of I want to keep this one, okay, I'm willing to let go of this one?
I actually got lucky, and my editing process was mostly adding more to the book.
Okay.
My first draft of the book was much shorter than the final book, and I had all the characters in there, but my first draft was maybe like 250 pages. The final book is 370, and so I got like the best note ever, which is write more, like go back and give us more. Because the worst note ever is cut
Yeah.
everything, cut the things that you love. And so I didn't have to do that. I also, in my very first draft of the measure, not only had like 8 different narrators that I was jumping between, but I was also like jumping around in chronology, like moving back and forth in time. And my agent was like, yeah, no, this isn't going to work. Like, no one is going to follow this book. Um, so that was a very helpful note as well. And I think I think it was my first book. I was like trying to feel ambitious, trying to feel like, oh, I'm going to do something really, cool and complicated, and I'm going to jump around and like show off. And I failed. So,
You
um,
failed forward.
yes, it's the note is that it's much better to just not confuse your readers. So, yeah.
I think that's a huge thing to call out. This was your first published book. What were some of the surprising things? Because I know you said you did not expect any of this to happen. What have been some of the most surprising things or unexpected things that have come to you?
Yeah. I think it's just been like such an amazing journey. And certainly, as you mentioned, like getting the phone call for the Jenna Read with Jenna book club was like a huge surprise, super memorable moment. I was like screaming on the phone.
I would be too.
um, right, and it was like you find out like 6 months before it gets announced publicly, and so then kind of sitting on this like secret that I knew was like life changing for me was a pretty wild ride, and I'm super grateful for that. And yeah, and then like the difference between writing book one and book two, I feel like was also unexpected. I think book two was hard, and I think I thought that, oh, I've already written a book, like this will be easy, like I've done this, I know I can do it now. And so I was sort of perhaps naive, I guess, and like writing the second book was really hard, and I've talked to a lot of authors who say that the second book is the hardest. Other authors are then like, no, every book is hard, like there's no they're just all hard. And so that journey too was kind of, I felt like, oh, this should be so easy, I've done this, I know I can do it. And it was then writing a second book with just a lot more like expectation and sort of voices in my head and I couldn't, like never again will I have the experience of what I had with my first book of just like writing in an attic with like only my mom, like reading it, like it's just never going to be that way again.
Are there any other book ideas or future product projects that you can share about at this point in time?
I'm trying to write a third book now, but the third book is proving harder than the second.
Oh,
And again, it's like I feel this comfort of like, well, I know I've done it. But I feel like for me, the idea is such an important part of it because it has to be something that's going to energize me for both of my books took 3 to 4 years to write, and so it needs to be something that I'm super passionate about that I can sustain for like 4 years. um, and so that I have pretty, I think, like a high standard for just like myself personally of what I'm excited to buy. Um, so that's what I'm currently trying to to spend my days working on. But yeah, and also just still doing festivals and book club events and things like that, which is amazing. Especially that, like, I'm still doing things for the measure, which did come out a few years ago, but people are still discovering it, and that's really cool.
So do you already have the idea for book three and you're working on it, working on kind of fine tuning it, or it's the very first
I've
thing?
hit a couple dead ends with previous ideas, and so I'm like, I keep starting down a road with things, and I'm like, is this road going to lead somewhere beautiful, or is it going to like hit a wall? And so that's the journey right now. And I feel like I hope that's the hardest part. Like the best part of writing is when you're just like really in the flow, and like everything's coming and I know where I'm going, and characters are really jiving and stuff. And like that's like a high that I'm chasing, and so hopefully in the coming months I can get there.
Oh, I love it. I cannot wait. I know it's years in the making, but
Yeah.
it does. I will read it.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I always love to do some quick fire questions. So I'm thinking maybe four. Done. All right. Well, you were a travel writer before, so I'm going into some of those. Your most surprising or favorite place that you have traveled to?
Favorite place I've ever traveled to is Italy. I put scenes set in Italy in the measure because of that, as like a tribute to how much I love being there.
Yeah, I love the fact that people's life experiences really come through and make the books different, you know. So,
Yes, yes.
where is your next bucket list travel destination?
Top of my bucket list is New Zealand. It's far away, but maybe I'll get there.
I went to Auckland before. We went to Australia and then made a stop, but everybody says you have to go to the South Island. So someday I will go back and
Yes, I would
more.
combine it with Australia. I think if you're going that far, you got you
Yes.
got to do it. Yeah. So you'll have to send me your tips for Australia.
Oh, it was a while ago. It was also, I'll have to, yes. We'll exchange notes. So I know you're not huge on audiobooks, and I read on all the different formats, but what are you reading right now on your various formats?
Right now, I'm reading in hardcover The Antidote by Karen Russell. I really liked Karen Russell's prior book, Swamplandia. She just has like, her brain is fascinating. And I'm very lucky and I get some like advanced copies, sneak peeks of books that have not come out yet. And so I have two of those at the moment as well. Into the Blue by Emma Brody, which is kind of an epic love story that is probably coming out in the spring or summer. Um, and This Is Not About Us by Allegra Goodman, which is coming out very soon.
Let's see. This
Yeah,
is
it's like it's
how
a perk of
my
the job. It's a
card
perk of the
gets
job.
longer and longer. What it is now. And then the Libby holds come ready, and then everything just gets thrown out the door. But
Yes, yes. I use the library a lot as well because I couldn't afford to not do that.
love my library. The last one is, what is a favorite tool in your house that you either can't live without or you think is really underrated?
Oh, it's my ice cream maker. I have an ice cream maker, and um, I don't know if it's underrated or if I couldn't live without it, but I just really love it. And it makes homemade, really good ice cream in like 2 hours. And so that's like my new special thing.
I was like, is it the Cuisinart
It's
one
the
or
Cuisinart. Yeah,
we have
yeah.
one where you have to leave it in the freezer for a while, right? So you have to prepare ahead of time.
Yes. Yes. So you have to leave like the mixing bowl in the freezer at least for 24 hours before you make ice cream. I now just leave it in there all the
All the
time so that if I ever have a craving, I can just make it.
Okay, that's funny because ours is in there, and I don't know when the last time we made ice cream was.
It's okay. Mine is sitting there in the freezer and there's like frozen peas sitting inside of it. Like it's a storage container as well. But it's so good. And you only need like a handful of ingredients on hand. Like when you need like a whole milk and a heavy cream and cocoa powder or something if you want to do that. But yeah, it's, I feel like I'm this is sponsored by Cuisinart, me talking about something else.
Not sponsored at all.
I know, right? I'm just a fan. I just like
Yeah.
ice cream.
Yeah. If I busted it out, my kids would love it and I'd be mom of the month. So I should do that. This is motivating me to do it. And we're in California, so the weather is great,
It's
guys. We're
year
not in
round ice cream.
blizzards and everything. So sorry, friends that are listening from the East Coast or, where you're getting blizzards in the middle of the country. But we can go on forever. But anything else that you would want to leave our listeners with before we end?
Just thank you for listening and thank you for reading. And like, if this journey has sort of taught me anything of like publishing and meeting readers, it's that like book people are the best people. And so thank you guys for being so amazing and for reigniting my love of reading has happened kind of over this process of meeting so many readers. Yeah, everyone, they're the best.
Love that. And for anybody that wants to connect with you further, where can they find you?
They can find me on Instagram at Nikki Erlick, or my website, nikkierlick.com. I'm very lucky, and no one else had taken my name in any sort of, any handles, any websites. So everything is just me, Nikki Erlick.
Perfect. And we'll have the links as well, so you don't have to go searching everywhere. We can have it easy for you. But all that to say, friends, go read it. Both the books were fantastic. If we want to talk about it, put your questions in the comments. We've got you. So thank you, Nikki. This was such a fantastic conversation. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.